Hello, welcome to episode 4. My family and I are currently practicing the shelter-in-place kind of protocol, but luckily that still includes going on walks, so I'm on a walk in Somerville right now. And today we're going to be talking about, this is the end of our Descartes unit. This is the last video lecture on Descartes, and we're talking about the foundations of knowledge still, but we finally reached the point where we can say what they are and explore what that means. And part of what is involved is also Descartes' argument for mind-body dualism. So we'll cover that today too. So just as a review, last time we talked about the cogito, which is the name of Descartes' argument that we must know that we exist, or that he knows that he exists, or that you know you exist. And the idea is that whenever you're thinking, you know that you are thinking, or you know that you exist. Something is thinking, and that thing is you. So and we were talking about, how can you be sure that you exist if you don't know that there's not an omnipotent God that's trying to deceive you? But how could God deceive you about your own existence? I mean, you would have to exist in order to be deceived. So it doesn't seem like it's possible that you could be deceived about your own existence. Because what's being deceived? You are, but you must exist then. So then the next question is, well, what am I? I know that I exist, but what am I? What is this thing that exists that is, being deceived? Well, so what we're doing right now is we're using the method of doubt, and the method of doubt tells us that if something is not 100% certain, then we treat it as false. And another reminder that just because we're pretending that things are false when we have some doubt doesn't mean that Descartes is literally arguing that these things are false. Just a constant reminder of that point. So now if I want to ask, well, what am I? I have to, within the method of doubt, while I'm using the method of doubt, I'm trying to ask what I am. So I have to wonder, do I have a face? Do I have arms and legs? All of these things are in doubt because I might be dreaming, I might be being deceived. And so I have to treat it as false. I have to say, I don't have a body, in fact. I don't have a face. Oh, here we are at the train tracks. Likewise, I have to admit to myself that the idea that I'm moving around, that I'm walking over a bridge, that I'm moving past things, that I'm moving my body, that I'm moving my mouth, they all also admit of some doubt, because if I'm a dreaming being that doesn't have a body, my mouth isn't moving, I don't have a mouth, I don't have arms, there's no external world at all, so I'm not moving over the ground. All of these things are in doubt, so they have to be treated as false. I'm not moving over the ground. I don't have a body. I don't have a face. I don't have a brain. I don't have any physical parts at all. And I don't need food. I don't grow. So what could I be? What's left? All that's left is the stuff that I can't doubt. And the stuff that I can't doubt is my own mind, the existence of my own mind. So Descartes concludes, even though I can doubt that I have a body, that I have hands, that I have a face, that I have a brain, I can't doubt that I have a mind. That's the thing that's doing the thinking in the I think, therefore I am thought process. So I know that I must at least be the thing which is thinking these thoughts. So I know that I have a mind, sort of necessarily. Whatever else I might be, I have a mind. I should qualify that use of necessarily, because it doesn't mean that I necessarily exist in that sense. I might not have existed. I'm not a necessary being the way that some people think like God is a necessary being. So I'm going into Union Square right now. It's definitely not completely empty, but it's pretty empty. I'm trying to keep my distance from everybody. Okay, so where was I? Right, I necessarily have a mind. Okay, so this is connected with Descartes' dualism argument. So if I know that I have a mind, but I don't know that I have a body, this is where he starts to leverage an argument that the mind isn't the body. So if, I'll put it this way, I think this is the way it's put in the slides. If it's possible for the mind to exist without the body existing, then the mind and the body can't be the same thing. This is just a general principle that if it's possible for X to exist without Y existing, then X can't be Y. It's possible for there to be one thing without there being the other, then they must be two different things. Market basket. For a different example of this principle, let's think about Mark Twain and Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain is the famous author who wrote, Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. There's a bunch of books I can't think of any of them. Anyway, who's Samuel Clemens? Samuel Clemens just is Mark Twain. That's his birth name. So Samuel Clemens is one person. Mark Twain is not a different person. They're one and the same. You couldn't have Mark Twain. Like if you took Mark Twain out of existence, that would be taking Samuel Clemens out of existence. They're identical. So if two things are actually one thing, you can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other one. But now let's look at the mind and the body, or like the mind and the brain. If they're one and the same thing, you can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other one. But Descartes seems to be showing us that we might not have a brain, but we definitely have a mind. It seems like it's possible then that the body doesn't exist, that there is no brain, but it's not possible that the mind doesn't exist. Therefore, those two things must not be the same thing. Because if they were identical, you couldn't have one without the other. So that's the argument. So if you believe that, you haven't all the way gotten to the immortality of the soul, but you have gotten to this dualism perspective. The mind and the body are not the same. The body passes away. That doesn't say anything about what happens to the mind. So Descartes thinks that we have an immortal soul. But that's what we're working with then. So it seems, at least to him then, that the foundations have to do something with your perception of your own mind, which is something distinct from your body. You can perceive your own existence, the existence of this mind. You cannot be deceived of the existence of that thing, because how would that happen? But you can be deceived about the existence of the body. People just hear me talking to myself about philosophy. At least a couple of people heard me. This is very empty though, this back street. Okay, so that's Descartes' argument for dualism, and it points in the direction toward what the foundations are supposed to be. I have immediate access to the things that are in my mind. I don't have immediate access to the things that are in the environment, including my body, because the body is the environment. My body is part of the world that I perceive, but it's not part of my mind. My mind is distinct from my body. I perceive directly the contents of my mind. I don't perceive directly the body. I sort of infer the existence of my hands from the mental image that I have of my hands. Okay. Image of my hand. I'm not seeing the real thing. I'm directly in my mind perceiving a mental image of a hand or something like that. And to see this, the idea is, well, I can be deceived that there is such a hand out there in reality, but I can't be deceived that I'm having an image of a hand in my mind. So the foundations of our knowledge aren't just that we exist, but all the properties of our mind that we can't be deceived about. So Descartes thinks, sure, I can be deceived that I have a body. I can be deceived that I'm out here on the street, that there's a tree over there. And it might be that this image of the tree, here I'm gonna go closer. It might be that this image of the tree is an illusion. So let's look. So maybe there's no tree in reality. And maybe the image that I'm experiencing is just being fed to me by, an evil demon, tricking my mind into perceiving something outside of itself, which isn't really there. But the thing I can't be deceived about is that I'm having an inner image of this tree. Like, the fact is that I'm experiencing the tree. Like, the fact is that I'm experiencing the tree. So even if there's no tree there, I know that I'm having an experience in my mind of the tree. And there's nothing the demon can do, even if it's God, an all-powerful being, can't deceive me about what I seem to be perceiving. I know with 100% certainty that I seem to be seeing a house here, even though I don't know with 100% certainty that it's really there. The thing that I know absolutely is the contents of my own mind. Okay, so what goes into the content of the mind? I mean, can we list out all the things that are mental things about which we can't be deceived? So here's a list. So I seem to know without a doubt that I'm perceiving things. So everything that comes by way of the senses are immune to doubt. It's not that I have to just double check and be absolutely certain we're clear here. I should be doubting that my perception, that my experiences relate to an external world. But what I can't doubt is that I'm experiencing an inner world filled with like images, sounds, smells, tastes, and all that kind of stuff. So it's my my sense data, we're going to call them later, those are beyond doubt that I'm having them. And secondly, my thoughts, that I'm having a thought, is beyond doubt. So it might be that I'm getting these thoughts implanted into my head, like I'm thinking about 2 + 2 = 4, let's say, and just have that thought. I mean, I could be deceived that 2 + 2 = 4, possibly. Descartes doesn't actually think that that's true, but you might think, well, a thought could be deceptive, but the fact that I'm having the thought, I can't be wrong about that. Okay, so another thing that seems to be apparently immune to doubt is acts of will. So, I mean, I can't be sure that I willfully like pick something up because I can't be sure that I have hands or that there are things in an external world. But the fact that I'm trying to do something, that I have like the impulse to try something, or that I will for something to happen, it seems I can't be mistaken about that. So we can be certain that we're thinking, that we're perceiving, that we're willing things. We can also be certain that we're doubting things. So if you're feeling skeptical that the external world exists, you can reflect on that fact and know with 100% certainty that you're doubting. So that's another component. We can be 100% certain that we doubt, that we feel, that we think. I listed a few other ones in the slides. I can't remember them all off the top of my head. But so now what I want to ask is, if you go through the cogito, so part of one of the things that Descartes says is, to the extent that we're certain that we exist, we must also be certain of the contents of our own thoughts. Because after all, the reason we believe that we exist is because we went through the thought process. I think, I exist. But we must thereby, we have to presuppose that we understand what those thoughts mean, if that makes any sense. By the way, we're on the other side of this. That was the bridge that we were over earlier, I think. Actually, no, I can't tell. I'm bad at knowing my spatial location in the world. This might be from reading too much philosophy. I don't know. Actually, I've pretty much always been bad at knowing where I am. But I've been reading philosophy for a long time too. I don't know. Okay, so what I'm talking about is if you're going through the argument, you're thinking about the argument, you think, I think, therefore I must exist. You're having these thoughts in your mind. Part of that certainty is that you know with absolute certainty that the word I in your mental thought refers to you. So you have to know the meaning of the symbols, or the concepts have to be self-evident. And so this leads to this perspective that Descartes endorses. It's crucial to his epistemology, that if we have a clear and distinct idea in our mind, if we can clearly think it, then if the existence of that idea is not in doubt, you can't doubt that you're having the idea in your mind that you're having. You can't doubt that you're having the thought that you're having. But that thought is a meaningful thing. I mean, it expresses a proposition, you could say. So one of the things that is sort of crucial to the foundationalism is that you know with absolute certainty the thoughts that are going on in your head, and you understand what they mean. One way of talking about meaning is you understand the conditions under which they're true. So the thought, I exist, you understand what the truth condition of that is, your existence. You understand what it means in that sense. So then the principle is, to the extent that I have clear and distinct ideas, I can know things about those ideas. So I can do a kind of introspection into the realm of my ideas and learn things. As long as I'm thinking very carefully and clearly, I can learn things by examining the ideas in my own mind, as long as they're clear and distinct. The idea is, a lot of people, according to Descartes anyway, a lot of people just don't think very clearly, and they don't know the kinds of things that a philosopher who lays around all day and just thinks knows. So Descartes sees himself as thinking more clearly and carefully, and by examining the ideas in his own mind, he's gaining knowledge that like ordinary people who don't sit around thinking don't have. These are all sort of crucial components of how philosophy sees its own work. At least it influenced a lot of philosophers, this perspective. So I want to talk about that next. When we're looking around at the world, even as scientists, we're examining plants and stuff, and examining the solar system and the weather patterns. All of these observations that we're making are based on our perceptions. But from Descartes' point of view, the role of philosophy is to get clear about how the perceptions even lead to knowledge of the external world. All we start with is knowledge of our own minds. And so a huge part of the role of the epistemologist in the classical abstract tradition is to try to explain how we can get from the foundational mental state knowledge that we have that's absolutely certain, and get to the external world. How do we get into knowledge about the external world and get our scientific knowledge going? So this is a part of the meditations that I don't go into, but basically Descartes thinks he can prove that God exists just by examining ideas in his mind, ideas about God. His idea of God is the basis for his 3 arguments for God's existence. And then with that premise, once he establishes that God exists, and we're not going to get into how he's doing that, that's not really a focus for us, but I encourage you to read it. It's really interesting. But the point is, for him, he is able to establish, he thinks that there's no omnipotent deceiver because we know that there's an all-good God just from examining our own ideas. And then an all-good, all-powerful God wouldn't allow us to be systematically deceived by an omnipotent deceiver. So that's Descartes' solution. Many philosophers have thought it's inadequate, doesn't convince us because, well, basically there's some doubt in the proofs of God's existence that he can pull them off under the method of doubt. Remember, all this has to proceed on the assumption that we might be being deceived, and we can only accept it if it's 100% certain under those conditions. So he sets the bar really high, And then it's questionable whether or not he makes it over that bar himself, the one that he set up. So I think a lot of the history of philosophy coming after Descartes is sort of stuck with his skeptical worry without being able to accept the solution that he gave. It's almost as if, I mean, philosophers statistically are atheists more often than not. So it's as if Descartes sets up this skeptical puzzle and says, well, God is the solution. And then the philosopher's like, I see the puzzle, but I don't accept the solution, so now what do we do? Okay, so the next reading, Bertrand Russell, on knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description, is about that problem, that puzzle. Like, how do we go from knowledge of our own sense data, our own mental stuff, to knowledge of the external world? So that's a preview. I want to say a few more things about the Cartesian program before we wrap up. All right, so we've got enough of the picture now to see the sort of quintessential image of classical abstract epistemology. You basically have access to your own mind, your own mental states. Everything is very internal. So all of your perceptions of what we think of as the external world are beyond the veil of what you are directly acquainted with or what you immediately perceive. It's sort of an inference from your own mental state to the existence of a shed. I have a mental image of the shed, and I somehow have to get to the external reality of the shed by an inference. So one of the things that's very obvious in this picture is that other people have no role in the fundamental explanation of where knowledge comes from, because you don't even know that other people exist. But that's pretty counterintuitive if we think naturalistically about how people learn. Like, think about how a kid learns about the world. And you take them out and you show them stuff. You tell them, you know, this is a tree, this is a dog, or you say, you know, 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, the whole edifice of our knowledge is built by social interactions with our parents, our teachers, friends, later scientists and professors and whatever. So the natural, normal way of explaining, I would say normal, that is not the theoretical philosopher's way, but like the ordinary person would never dream of doubting that other people play a fundamental role in the creation of knowledge. But for people trained in the Cartesian worldview, other people come in much later. You infer their existence the same way as, like, you know, I don't know that there's a car here. I don't know that there's a tree there. I know that I have these mental perceptions. Likewise, I don't know that there are people out there. I just have inner images of people, and I have to somehow build up from there to get knowledge of the people that actually exist outside of my mind, if they even are there. Okay, so that's going to be our starting point in the whole rest of the course, really. The next half of the course is going to be dedicated to sort of trying to solve some of these problems in abstract epistemology about how we can know that there's an external world. And then we're going to turn to the feminist epistemologists who have sort of challenged the whole Cartesian perspective and think that social relationships and politics and all these kinds of other more worldly concerns need to be considered at the most basic level of epistemology. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you're all staying healthy and sane.